flour mill was built in 1912. Well, it was probably built before that. There was a fire in 1912 that burned it to the ground, and in 1913 they built a new one. They replaced it, and my family bought it in 1935. My grandfather bought it in 1935, and they ran it till 1950 is when they shut it down. And at one time it was the biggest flour mill on this side of the Mississippi, and they ground wheat to make flour and corn, and they made cornmeal, and they made different things. And actually a lot of it was shipped all around the world at one time. The water wheel was a wheel at the dam, and it was probably I would guess probably a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch cable. And the cable was double-sided. I mean, it ran all the way down to the dam and back, and it was hooked to another wheel at the south side of the flour mill, and they would turn that wheel, which turned a bunch of line shafts with big flat belt pulleys, and there were line shafts on all 5 stories. The belts would go up and run the next floor and the next floor and the next floor up. So there was many machines run off of just one water wheel.
How long was that cable?
It probably had to be, probably a 1/4 mile long, maybe a little longer.
That amazes me that cable ran that far.
My grandfather on my mother's side, he worked there for my grandfather on my dad's side, and he was working. It used to run 24 hours a day, and he was working there in the wintertime. And this one night, in the middle of the night, they had a breakdown. They had to shut the water wheel down, and he told me that they shut it down, and several hours later they went to start it up. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and they couldn't figure out why the water wheel wouldn't go. So they went down to the dam. Well, the water wheel had froze into ice there and wasn't letting it turn. So the employees from the flour mill went down there. They were chipping the ice away, and the people that owned the ice company showed up about 5 o'clock in the morning, and they started fighting over the ice because they were letting all their ice go down the river, and 1 or 2 people were killed in that fight over the ice. Well, the ice company would, if they'd have showed up first, they would chunk the ice up, and I suppose they had a way to pick it out of the water, and then they'd store it in like an ice house, which usually was lined with bales of straw for insulation, and that's how we had refrigeration.
That just sounds so ancient to me.
Yeah.
When did the ice house go out of fashion? When did that stop?
I would guess that water wheel was probably shut down probably in the early 40s, and they went to electric motor, and they built a motor room on the side of the building where the water wheel used to be. There's the water wheel on the building, and they just had a power room there, and then electric motor ran a big flat belt into the basement that run all 5 stories in. And I tore all that equipment out of there in 1977.
You did?
Yeah. And everything was still intact. They closed it. They shut it down in 1950. And in the mid-70s, my dad and I were trying to figure out what to do with that building. It was too expensive to tear it down. It was too nice a building to tear down. And so we were just using it as a warehouse. And so we converted it into, it had an elevator leg. We'd put a new elevator leg in there to handle grain with the 6 tanks that were there. And then inside the building there was overhead bins, and we revamped the whole thing to make wild bird food. And we started that in 1978. And the feed mill was losing money for the last 10 years, from 78 to 88, when we finally shut it down. And the only thing that was making money was the bird food at that time.